Welcome back. Today we're looking at a YouTube commentary by Tinashe Peter that analyzes Candace Owens' comments on the Iranian protests. Let's just jump right in. The first major area for improvement is a real struggle with tonal consistency. The effectiveness of the whole piece is kind of compromised by this clash between really colloquial language and the sheer gravity of the subject.
That's a strong place to start. When you say clash, do you mean in the delivery, or is this about the words in the script?
Oh, it's definitely the words. In the section about the violence against protesters, he uses a lot of algo speak, to avoid censorship. He says a woman was, and this is a direct quote, pew-pewed in the face.
Pew-pewed? Wow.
Yeah. And then he talks about having kiki moments about the commentary. This is all while describing, lethal violence.
I mean, I can sort of see the logic. From a creator's point of view, I guess YouTube's algorithms they're so aggressive.
Of course.
Is it possible he's just trying to keep the video from getting demonetized or pulled down? The whole unalive trend is basically born from that.
That's almost certainly the intent, and we have to acknowledge he's working within those constraints. The problem, though, is the immediate juxtaposition. He uses pew-pewed, which makes you think of like a toy gun, and then, bam, he transitions right into this heartbreaking story about a woman sentenced to be hanged for her faith.
I see the friction there. It's a really jarring clash. You have this gamer speak, almost dismissive term, right up against a story about martyrdom.
Exactly. It feels like two different scripts got stapled together by mistake.
And it risks trivializing the exact thing he's trying to highlight.
It completely undermines the horror of it. You're trying to process a meme and a massacre at the same time, and your brain just kind of short circuits.
Right, it creates this tonal whiplash. You can't take the next part as seriously. So, how do you fix that? You don't want him to get banned, but you absolutely need the gravity.
The suggestion is really to just calibrate the vocabulary. Match it to the intensity of what you're actually talking about in that moment. You can be colloquial in the intro, sure, but when you bring in a victim story, the language has to shift.
Okay, so practically, what does that look like? Instead of that pew-pew line, what's an alternative that's still safe but serious?
A concrete example would be to just switch to a more grounded, sort of journalistic tone for that one sentence. Instead of a young lady was pew-pewed in the face, he could just say she was shot in the street while protesting.
Shot in the street. Simple. Direct.
And it's not graphic. It probably wouldn't trigger the algorithm.
Makes sense. It strips away the playfulness without being gratuitous.
Precisely. And that simple change would be a much better runway for what comes next, which is the text from the Christian survivor. That text uses this heavy theological language, doing the work of God, faith in Yeshua.
You can't get from pew-pew to faith in Yeshua without giving your audience vertigo.
You can't. You need that runway of seriousness to land that plane. Okay, moving on to structure. The argument here is that the video buries its most compelling piece of evidence.
Yeah, that primary source testimony.
Right. It's buried under this really long and self-referential intro.
I noticed that right away. It's a classic case of, losing the forest for the trees. I was watching the time code, and we spent a long time on his personal updates before we even get to Iran.
A significant amount of time.
He talks about his 21-day fast from Cuckoo Candace, explains his diet, the double-header video schedule. All of this comes before the core subject.
Let me play devil's advocate for a minute, though. Isn't there some value in that? Building rapport, the whole detox joke, it establishes his brand, it connects with his returning audience.
It does, but at what cost to the pacing? You have to think about the economy of attention, especially for a new viewer. The single strongest asset in this entire video is that text message.
Oh, it's absolute gold. I have suffered 9 months of imprisonment, sentenced to death by hanging. That line just stops you in your tracks.
It's undeniable proof of the stakes. But by putting it after all the banter about his diet and his schedule, he risks losing the very people who came for the geopolitical analysis. They might just click away.
So the vlog style is actually undermining the investigative substance.
That's it exactly. So the suggestion is to completely invert the structure. Use a cold open.
You mean just start with the victim's voice? No hello, no intro music, nothing?
Yes. Imagine this. The video starts, maybe it fades in from black, and you just hear him reading, seriously, I have suffered 9 months of imprisonment and was sentenced to death by hanging only because of my faith.
That grabs you instantly. You're not clicking away from that. You have to know what that's about.
Then you cut to him and he says something like, "This is the reality the media and Candace Owens is ignoring." And then you can introduce the context of the 21-day fast.
That's brilliant. It totally reframes the detox joke. It's not just a funny preamble anymore.
It becomes a reaction.
He needed the detox because the reality he's covering is so grim. That makes so much more sense. It aligns the humor with the gravity instead of delaying it.
And it centers the victim's voice, which seems to be his goal anyway.
Right, which ironically makes the host more effective.
Now let's look at the way he attacks the subject. A key thing that comes up again and again is the heavy reliance on derogatory nicknames. It really distracts from the legitimate points he's trying to make.
Scam dis, conspiracy can, Khomeini can, little Dolphy. It's a lot.
It's a very heavy saturation.
What, 4 or 5 different ones just in the first few minutes? It feels like he can't say her name without adding one.
It's pervasive.
But again, I wonder about the audience. I bet that plays super well to the choir, right? The people who already agree with him probably find it validating, even funny.
Oh, for sure. It's red meat for the base. It strengthens that in-group feeling. But the weakness here is that it acts as what you might call a credibility off-ramp for anyone who isn't already convinced.
A credibility off-ramp. I like that. So someone on the fence hears Little Dolphy and immediately thinks, okay, this isn't a serious analysis, this is just a hate watch.
Exactly. If your goal is to prove she's aligning with the jihadist dictatorship, which is what the Khomeini comparison is about, then that nickname needs to be the conclusion of your argument.
Not the premise.
Right. If you start with the insult, you just look biased. If you end with the label, it feels like you've actually proven something.
So what's the suggestion? Does he just stop using them? Does that take away some of the video's punch?
No, not entirely. It's part of his voice. But he should reduce the frequency. Let her own clips do the damage first. Let the evidence lead.
So don't tell me she's out of touch. Show me the clip where she says something that proves it.
Precisely. For example, there's that section on the clip where Owens talks about Netanyahu, saying Bibi is over here like, ooh, land.
Right, she makes it sound like a childish cartoon. It's so reductive.
Okay, so he could pause the video right there. Instead of just jumping to a nickname, he should explain why that specific phrasing aligns with the Ayatollah's narrative. He can draw the parallel.
So connect the dots for the viewer. Show your work.
Yes, and only after he's proven that alignment, then he can drop the label. He could say, this is why her rhetoric is indistinguishable from the regime's. She is effectively acting as Khomeini Candace.
I see. That turns the nickname into an earned classification. It's a verdict, not just an accusation.
It validates it. It treats the audience like they're smart enough to follow the logic. And it makes the whole critique much harder to dismiss as just some hit piece.
And it keeps that neutral viewer watching long enough to hear the actual argument.
Okay, final point. And this one is a bit more nuanced. The narrative assumes the audience is already completely aligned with the host's specific spiritual and political worldview, and that really limits who he can persuade.
I felt this too. There's a lot of insider language. It felt like I'd walked into a private conversation that I wasn't quite part of.
Yes, exactly. The script just expects you to get references to time-traveling Charlie Kirk or Beelzebub without any setup. He talks about the spirit of Cuckoo Candace.
Beelzebub himself. That's a very specific theological frame. And it's tricky because he's trying to debunk a conspiracy theory about, quote, the Jews, while using his own spiritual warfare language.
It's a very tightrope to walk. The weakness is that if I'm a secular viewer, maybe I'm concerned about human rights in Iran, and he starts talking about Beelzebub, I might just check out.
Right. You might think, okay, this is getting a bit too esoteric for me.
He needs to build a bridge to those people, not a wall of insider language.
But isn't that his brand? He clearly has a strong faith perspective. We don't want him to dilute that and sound inauthentic.
He shouldn't dilute it. He should contextualize it. The suggestion is to make those spiritual references accessible to people who don't share his faith. He needs to translate the theology into, say, sociology when it's needed.
Okay, so how do you bridge Beelzebub to a secular political observer without losing your voice?
He can use that story he tells about the Persian family he used to work for. Remember, he says they were secular, atheist, or Christian?
Right. The ones who escaped the regime. That was a really powerful human moment.
He can use that. So when he's talking about a spirit of deception, he can frame it through their experience.
What would that sound like?
He could say something like, whether you see this as spiritual warfare or just political propaganda, the result is the same. The silencing of victims.
Whether spiritual warfare or political propaganda. That opens the door. It says, you don't have to believe in my God to believe in my argument.
Exactly. It validates his worldview but invites everyone else to agree on the outcome. It keeps his spiritual core, which is authentic, but it widens the net.
It stops the viewer from thinking this is a sermon and helps them see this is a dismantling of propaganda.
Precisely. It keeps the focus on the subject's logical fallacies, not the host's theological framework.
It really just comes down to accessibility then. The raw material is strong, the primary source is incredible. It's just about clearing away these few obstacles so people can really see the argument.
That's a perfect way to put it. The content is there, we're just tuning the transmitter. So to wrap this up, let's recap the main actionable takeaways from this critique. First, align the tone with the gravity of the evidence. Avoid slang like pew-pew when you're talking about an execution. It just cheapens the argument. Second, move your goal, that survivor's text message, to the very beginning. Hook them with the reality of the situation first, then you can show your personality. Third, use nicknames as a conclusion, not a substitute for an argument. Earn the insult. Show us why she's Khomeini Candace before you call her that. It lands much harder. And finally, bridge that gap between your spiritual language and secular political analysis. Frame it in a way that invites everyone in, focusing on the shared outcome, the suffering of the victim. This piece has so much potential, mostly because of that unique primary evidence. We would love to see how these changes affect the final product. Please feel free to apply these ideas and submit your work back in for another look. Thanks for listening to The Critique.